Hey there, welcome to the Agents of Revival podcast. If you're ready to be healed and take full accountability of your life by evolving into your best self, then this is the podcast for you. I am your host, Andrea Griffin Rogers, and I'll share with you winning steps as well as personal tips and anecdotes on how to go from brokenness to wholeness and from scattered pieces to inner peace. So come on in and join me on this healing journey, and let's become whole together. Enjoy it! Hey, what's up, guys? Man, welcome back. Today is our last episode of season 5 of the Agents of Revival podcast, and we are talking about keep the change. Keep the change. All season long, we were talking about vision in various capacities. I covered topics that pertain to vision in terms of clarity on the vision, understanding your vision, how to operate in your vision, the right team needed to see your vision grow, and how to show up and execute your vision properly, effectively, and efficiently. And I'm going to focus today on this last one of how to show up and execute your vision properly, effectively, and efficiently. I kind of touched base on this one yesterday when I talked about be authentically you. Because at the end of the day, it is about living an authentic lifestyle. And this is what God desires for all of us to do. We were never meant to pretend or to just push through and act like things aren't bothering us or that we're not struggling with things. We are meant to live honest lives as human beings who have real emotions. And it's so sad that we live in a world and a time now where having emotions has become a negative thing. It should be positive, but people are now operating a negative way or speaking about it negatively in terms of like, oh no, you have emotions. And it's interesting because it's okay if you show the emotion of anger, like that's applauded. It's okay if you show the emotion of hatred. That's applauded. It's okay if you show the emotion of love. That's applauded. But as soon as you show the emotion of fear, it's booed. Soon as you show the emotion of sadness or grief, it's booed. People hate that. Oh my gosh, no. Ugh, you're crying. Oh my gosh, what do I do? People look for the door to run out when they see that you're having an emotion. We all cry. We all are human. It's like that song. I won't say the name because it's an old song, but it's by a popular band, and they say, I know you think your stuff don't stink, but like your stuff do not smell like roses. Like your stuff stinks too. Everybody who goes to the bathroom, stuff stinks. That's just life. We all go to the bathroom. And so how does that equate here? Because if we all have these bodily functions, then that means we all have these body emotions. And why is one okay and not the other? It is time to recognize that in order to show up and execute your vision properly and effectively, you got to be willing to be authentic with you and to operate in a new level of living. And that new level of living really is not new. It's getting back to an older version of you that got squashed out at some point in time. What I mean by that, you guys always hear me say, like, how's the little girl boy inside of you doing? Because that version of you is like, I want to say the real you. And I don't mean that in the sense of that you are a child. Even though, you know what, I don't mean in the sense that you're a child. I mean that in a sense of there is a gentleness. There is a kindness. There is a willingness to want to love as if you've never been hurt before. There is a vulnerability in a child that we don't see in adults today. If children don't like something, they'll say it. If children stub their toe or get hurt in some way, they cry and they don't feel anything about their crying. They are okay to let those tears fall. If children are happy about something, they will show that happiness. If children are in love about something or whatever, or just loving something, that let's say it's a puppy, they will show it. And they don't care nothing about it. They don't care nothing about how anybody else is gonna look at them or respond or what they think or what your comments are. There's this vulnerability that they just openly accept and receive and maneuver and operate in, and they have no care or concern about it in the world. Because it's not wrong. It's not wrong to a child until somebody tells them it's wrong. And then their heart becomes hardened. Because you have now put a damper or a ding into what God says is beautiful, because it's in a childlike stage of faith. And I talked about that before on this podcast. I talked about childlike faith. It's in that place, as he talks about in John chapter 4, or John chapter 3, where Jesus says, like, that's a beautiful place to be. Like, you must be willing to be born again. And it doesn't mean you go back into the womb, but it means that you are willing to unlearn what this hardened, sinful world has taught you, that has made you build up this tough exterior, too afraid to be authentically you, too afraid to be vulnerable. It is not until you break down those barriers and become born again where you are able to walk into the destiny that God has in store for you. God is not going to bless who you pretend to be. No. This is why it's so important that you understand your identity and who God has called you to be. Not what man said about you. There are some of you that need to go back into the memory bank of your life and pick up some dreams that you left behind. There are some dreams and ideas that God gave you when you were a child that you were meant to carry with you, but because the adults around you dropped the ball, they did not understand or identify the talent in you, the gift in you, and they didn't hone it the right way. They try to squash it out of you. And so they told you to get a real job, and you need to go to school for this real thing so you can get a real job and work there for the next 50, 60 years and then retire. And then you could worry about what you're really passionate about. And God says, no, I put that passion in you as a child for a reason. It was a seed I planted in you that I wanted to grow over time. And when we are willing to exchange what once was, that is no longer working, in order to pick up this new way of living that God has in store for us, it's then where God says to you, keep the change. I've allowed you to go through a heart transplant. I allowed you to go through a tunnel transformation in order to see that the way you were living your life was how you felt like you needed to survive in this world. But now that you have become awakened to the true identity that I have of you, that you are my child, I'm giving you a new way of living. And as a result, I am giving you this change, this exchange of the old to put into you what's new. And what's new ties into something that was in you as a child, that seed that was planted in you that God now allows to grow up in you in order to bear fruit in its season, in its time. But you got to be willing to say, you know what? I have to divorce the mess. I have to give up what once was in order to go for the gold, to see what God really has in store for me. Yes, people told you that dream will never become nothing. People told you that the way you are is a problem. I'm going to give you a perfect example, because, I like to give you practical examples for spiritual principles, but I also want to make it real for you. So let me share a little about me. Growing up, I used to be scolded and made fun of and ridiculed. I don't just mean by peers. I mean by family members, teachers, and whatnot that used to judge me based on how much I asked questions and how I always had something to say. and how I always took my time in talking. And so I would hear things being said to me by parents, teachers, family, you name it, as a scold, as a mean remark of like, oh God, it take you 50,000 years to tell a story. Oh my goodness, you got to keep asking 50,000 questions. Why you got to always ask a question? Why you can't just do it? Why you always have to just tell me, like, you're so long-winded. You take so long to tell the story. Like, why don't you just hurry up and get to the point? And so over the years, what I once loved of storytelling, what I once loved of even writing short stories and poems, when I look at some of the writings that I wrote, especially in my teenage years, they were dark. Because, and I see the change. I see the change in how I used to write as a child to teenage years. But when you've been dealing with, so let's say that seed was planted in me of parents and guardians scolding me and ridiculing me of the way I am and how I am, of asking questions, of the way that I talk and the way I tell a story. Let's say they started that at the age of 2 or 3 years old, like when I first started talking. By the time 13 came, that seed had grown into a weed. And so when I look at my writings from that point onward, from 13 to, I think I actually stopped writing at like 18 or 19, it's dark. Why? Because all it is was an infection that had grown up over time. It stopped being, writings about love and butterflies and beautiful things. Because I used to be inspired by Robert Frost, to just dark and twisted because of the infection that had been festered in my heart by the words that people spoke over me. And this is why it's very important for you to understand that life and death is in the power of the tongue. That means words have power. I know the enemy has been lying to you and through culture saying that sticks and stones may break my bones, but words may never hurt me. That's not true. That's a lie from the pit of hell. Because God spends so much time in the Bible talking about the importance of words. As a man thinketh, so is he. And a lot of times what we think about ourselves is because of words that were put in us at some point in time. Whether it was childhood or adulthood, whatever. At some point in time, somebody spoke something that you didn't even mean to internalize, but you did. I remember somebody said about me once, and I'll get back to my child story in a minute, but I remember somebody said about me once, and this was them lashing out at me in anger, so it's more so them projecting onto me. They said like, oh, just stop being passive aggressive and just tell me what you mean. And it was like, okay, I never viewed myself as passive aggressive at all. But after they said that, it just kept ringing in me and it made me more and more depressed. And so I started to internalize that, like, okay, I guess that's how people view me. I guess I am passive aggressive. And God had to shake that out of me. He had to change my mentality to say, no, you're meek. And I said in my word in Matthew chapter 5 that the meek shall inherit the earth. He also told me that you have a pure heart. And he says in the same chapter of Matthew chapter 5 that those with a pure heart, blessed are those with pure heart, for they will see God. I had no idea until God awakened me to the reality of who he really saw me and created me to be. Because man had spoke their words on me negatively and I took them. And so back to my childhood, when for years hearing your family, especially your family, because as a child, you definitely value your family, your parents and the guardians, the older people around you. That could be older aunts and uncles and whatnot. You value their opinions so strongly. And so when all of them are downing you for how you speak, how you ask questions and give information, for me, storytelling and whatnot, that festered in me that clearly nobody wants to hear my voice. So let me just stop speaking. And so that's why when I said I got to the point when I turned 18 or around that time, I just stopped writing. I stopped speaking. I stopped writing. I stopped honing a talent that God placed inside of me before I was ever born. I know it now as a talent and a spiritual gift, but I didn't know it before. And the spiritual gift is being willing to help people and serve people and lead people. But you can only lead when you have the answers to the questions, which means you got to ask the questions. But I didn't know that at that time because I had not become spiritually awakened. I hadn't grown spiritually mature, and the right people weren't speaking into my life that this was a talent God placed in me. So it never produced itself. Now, it doesn't mean that they didn't see it, because as long as or at the earliest age I can remember of writing, I was always bought different composition books and notebooks to write in, but people would say to me they don't want to hear it. And so when they would say these words to me, when they would squash wanting to read my short stories or my poems, when they were being negative me, or why you gotta always ask questions, and when they were saying those words to me, I started to believe that I had nothing to share. I had nothing to offer, that nobody wanted to hear from me. And so I might as well stop speaking. And so God dealt with me on that. And he said to me one day in a vision, when he called me to teach the gospels through my story, interesting enough, he said to me, this is back in April 25th, 2017. He said to me, "Why are you so timid?" And when he asked the question, I was like, what? But then he asked the question again and then reiterated, "You have a strong and powerful voice." Actually, you know what? Let me rephrase that. He spoke to me, "You have a strong and powerful voice, so why are you so timid?" So actually, he spoke the truth to me first before asking me the question. But I lingered on the question because I felt like I wasn't timid. But now I look back, and if God is telling you you're timid, you're timid. So yes, now I look back and I'm like, you're absolutely right, God, I was timid. I was too afraid because I felt like, because of what was implanted in me for years, nobody wants to hear from me. They don't like to hear me talk. They don't want to hear my storytelling. They don't want me to ask any questions. They don't want it. So I need to just be quiet. I'm not like other people who they do want to hear from. So I should just shut my mouth and be quiet. And it took God to intervene in my life, to give me that change of mind, of direction, to call me by name and say, "I created you to be a storyteller. I created you to ask questions. I created you in my image. I don't care what man says." And it doesn't matter who, even if it's your family, doesn't like it. Because I have an audience that do. I have a platform, a place, a body of people that will need to hear your story, that will need to hear you speak and share. I need you to ask questions. I need you to break free from this bondage that people have placed on you, that said that you're not enough, or that what you carry that I placed in you as a gift, that they made it into a curse. It's not a curse. It's a gift that God put in you. And so what is it in you that you have been negating or neglecting since you were a child because man put their mouth on it and said that it's useless? That man scolded and judged and ridiculed. And when I say man, I mean human beings. It could be your mama, your daddy, your auntie, your uncle, grandma, grandpa, best friend, teacher, whoever it was. Somebody said something to you that made you afraid to be who God called you to be. That made you afraid to live out loud your truth. And I don't mean your truth in the way the world says your truth. I mean the authentic version of you that was there since you were a child. That version of you that you have been suppressing for a long time because somebody said that there was no way for you to make money. There was no way for you to survive. There was no way. There was no audience for that. There was no purpose for that very thing that you've been afraid of. Somebody squashed it out of you. Somebody said that, I even had somebody say to me one time very meanly, which also added to my timidity, of, you emotional roller coaster. Like, I don't care to hear I don't care to hear what you're going through. I don't care to hear your problems. And so when they said that to me, and it was at a place where I was so broken, I was so hurt, I was so damaged, I was so depressed, I was grieving so strongly. And when they said that to me, it literally just knocked the rest of the wind out of me. And so I became hardened at that time. Fine, I ain't gonna never show emotion again. Fine, I ain't gonna never cry again. Fine, I ain't gonna never tell nobody what I'm going through again. Because this one person who opinion I valued a lot at that time said that to me. And it was a family member. And they said that to me at my most broken, vulnerable place. They literally lashed out to me when I was crying to them to tell me, listen, I don't care to hear what you're going through. You are an emotional roller coaster. That is so hurtful. When God created us to have emotions. Yes, he also created us to have self-control. But before we even get to the self-control, the fruits of the Spirit, in Galatians chapter 5, he says love, kindness, joy, patience, long-suffering. Self-control is at the very end. But there's a whole bunch there before you get to that part. So that means that I've created you to have emotions. And it's okay. The shortest sentence in the Bible says Jesus wept. And yet, because of what people said, like they said to me, people are afraid to weep. People are afraid to mourn. People are afraid to break free out of the box that others put them in because somebody put their mouth on it and spoke negatively. And so you got to get yourself free today. I went through the process. And in me breaking free from the image and the lies and the guck and muck of nasty comments that people threw on me and said about me and said to me, I received new garments of praise from God. I received a new way of thinking and being and living and looking and loving myself. And God said, yup, great, keep the change. Don't focus on them. Don't focus on what they said. Don't even focus on how that hurt anymore because you've healed from that. You've done the work and you've healed from that. So we're not even going to try to bring that pain back up. And I want to say this cautiously because I don't want people to hear that and say, well, that's why I don't want to heal because time went by and so I don't bring that pain back up. No, time does not heal all wounds. You just learn how to operate and function in the dysfunction of the brokenness. But when you choose to address the wound and actually tend to it properly, get the right care, and then allow it to heal by doing the work of healing, then that's going to absolutely heal and address the wound. And so for me, because I did do the work, I did go through the process, I did have that exchange with God and my counselor and whatnot, then I was at a better place so that God was saying to me, don't go back to that negative place. And how do you go back to the negative place is operating in this new way of living, but then somebody else comes up and says something negative. No, you've already been there before. So you have learned some strategies, some tactics to allow that to not infect you anymore, but to bounce that right back off on them. To understand that this ain't personal, this spiritual. And it is not my spiritual battle to receive, so I'm not going to receive it. That is your spiritual battle that you're dealing with within yourself, and that's why you're projecting onto me to make it seem like I'm the problem. Now, that's not to say that there aren't times where we have to look at ourselves in the mirror and recognize if there really is a problem. But some things, like, for example, if somebody was to come to me today and say, oh, you know what, you're really long-winded. Okay, bet. I'm not taking that personally because that is your spirit that doesn't want to hear what my spirit has to share. That's the darkness in you that doesn't want to hear the light in me. But that's okay because it's just not for you. But there is somebody else that will want to hear it and won't mind. It won't matter to them of how long I took to encourage them because they'll be hungry enough to receive it. But see, years ago, before God gave me the change, oh no. Before God did a new heart transplant in me, oh no. If somebody would have said that then, I'd have shut down and received it and internalized it and would have tried to figure out ways to not be myself. But no, baby, no, not in this time. In this time, I've learned to be authentically me. And if you don't like it, if you don't want to receive it, then that's tough luck and that's on you. And God bless you. Nothing negative, nothing nasty to say to you. God bless you. I'm going to keep it moving to those who I am for. Because there's a big world out there. And I know my message is for those out there who are hungry and at a place in their life. And that's you listening. That's like, no, I need this word, Andrea. Please continue. Don't worry, sis. I got you. Don't worry, bruh. I got you. I'm going to keep going. I don't care what those naysayers got to say, because that's a spiritual battle in you, and the darkness in you doesn't want the light, and that's okay. But there's those that do. And so you got to look at yourself and say, you know what areas of my life need to change? What areas of my life do I need to exchange because of what somebody or some things that happened to me has done to me, that has kept me in a box and in an image that I thought was going to be my life? Because God wants to show you who you really are, who he has called you to be, he has designed for you to be. But it takes you willing to give that exchange, to give up the old habits and the old stinking thinking and the old naysayers and the old toxicity and the old hurts and pains and trauma. It comes from you being willing to give that to him and then allow him to teach you. That's why he says in Matthew chapter 11, verse 28, to come all to me who are carrying heavy burdens or heavy laden and you're weary, and I will give you rest. I will give you rest for your souls. Let me teach you, for I am gentle at heart, and the burden I give you is light. Not only is it light work in a sense, but it's the reason why he didn't put work after light. It's a light. It literally is illumination of your true identity in Christ Jesus. The authentic you, the real you that's revived and empowered to live out your most authentic life. Not the one you thought was the real you. That version of the real you that you thought up until this point was really the man-made version of you. But God says there's a spiritual version of you that I've always created you to be, but it requires you to come up higher in me, to dig deeper in faith, to recognize and ask God for that wisdom and for the revelation to see who you really are. And it requires the exchange, exchanging the old and receiving the new. And in receiving the new, you will be able to keep the change that God put on you, because you'll be walking in the authority of the truest version of yourself that God always created you to be, because he's not going to anoint or bless who you pretend to be. But when you choose to come to him authentically as yourself, the person who you were born as, who he created you to be, before you ever formed your mother's womb, he knew you. He set you apart for such a time as this to do something in the earth. It is that version that has the anointing and the authority to shift atmospheres, to change tides and directions and trajectories of your life, and also to crush demonic spirits and bring down strongholds. It is that version of you that will get and receive the power that God has for you. Not the version you pretend to be, not the version that you make up to be, not the version of you that you have grown to know up until this point. It requires a heart transplant. And in that heart transplant, when God takes out the stony, stubborn heart and puts in you a heart of flesh that wants to live and serve as he wants you to live and serve, then it's that version where he says, now I need you to keep this change and guard it. Guard your heart above all else, because everything flows from it. And so we are out of time. Man, where did time go, y'all? I don't know, but I pray that you all receive this message wholeheartedly, and that those that is for, maybe there's somebody else that came into your mind and you were like, you know what? I think my sister would enjoy this message. Or I think my brother would enjoy this message. Or I think my homeboy, my homegirl, or my auntie, my uncle, my mama, dad, somebody would need to hear this message. Send it to them, or your child. Send it to them so that they can receive the empowerment that they need as well, to do the work that they need to do to become their best authentic self. Because God has room in us and he has work for us to do in his field. But it is about us being willing to receive his power first before we go out and do anything in the world and say we represent Jesus. It is not by might, nor by power, but by the Holy Spirit that anything is accomplished, achieved, or done in the earth. So until next time, until season 6, y'all. And who knows, I mean, if God allows it, I'll drop some bonus content in the meantime, as I've done with you all before. But may the Lord bless you and keep you, cause his face to shine upon you. May the Lord our God be gracious to you, show you his favor, and give you shalom, give you his peace. Take care. Love you guys. See you soon. Bye.